Welcome everyone to the Proven Knowledge Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Church. I'm a music producer from Northeast Ohio. I began this weekly interview series to give you different perspectives from artists, producers, engineers, and other individuals in the music industry. In each episode, we touch on not only what has helped the person succeed, but we also touch on what has shaped them into the person that they are today. I hope you're able to gain some real proven knowledge from the show, and that it helps elevate you on your own journey to success as well. Let's get into it. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 206 here on the Proven Knowledge Podcast. Today, I welcomed a fellow podcaster and an artist as well. His name is Adam Dash. Adam hosts the podcast called the Sound Centric Podcast, which he talks about hip-hop. He talks about things going on in the industry, interviews a lot of cool people as well. I discovered Adam on Threads when I believe he was posting under a podcaster's post about how he had a show. So I went in and checked it out because I'm always looking for fellow podcasters that have cool platforms. And I really loved his content and just the things he was sharing on the show. So it was cool to be able to, get in touch with him and have him on the show this week. Talked about his love for hip hop, artists like J. Cole. We talked about, the recent beefs that have been going on between Cole, Kendrick, Drake, etc., which is kind of different than, what we talk about on this show. But it is kind of cool to just talk about the way that affects hip hop in general and how it affects the culture, which I think is kind of cool. And people like Adam, they review these things and look at these things for their own content as well, which I think is super cool to be able to have that as fans of music. And I can just tell, Adam is a very passionate person about hip hop music, what he does in general. Talked about, currently looking for a job in the industry while he's still doing the Sound Centric Podcast. And I just think his platform is going to keep growing. I think it's going to be cool to see, 10 years down the line, like what he's going to be doing with this. And I'm happy that we got in touch, and I really hope you guys enjoy this one. Another unique conversation. So without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome everyone to episode 206 here on the Proven Knowledge Podcast. Today I have another great podcast host as well, fellow podcast host. He hosts a show called Sound Centric Podcast, which I think is super awesome. Love what this guy's doing. I know he also has experience as an artist as well. So I'm happy to pick his brain today. And everybody, please welcome Adam Dash to the show. How you doing, man?
Thank you so much. Amazing intro. Made me feel good.
Appreciate it, man.
I'm doing well. Like I said before, hip hop is experiencing one of the coolest weeks ever in history that we're going to look back and be like, damn, Kendrick and Drake, the two top dogs, actually went at each other and made songs towards each other. So I'm soaking it in.
Yeah. Well, like I said, man, I'm happy you took the time out of a pretty busy week, probably for you as well, of just being able to join me today. And, I'm excited for this one. So, we usually have the guests give some background about, how did you get into music initially? Just kind of, what do you do for people that don't know you and the platform?
Yeah, so I grew up obsessed with hip-hop music. I'm the youngest of two older brothers, so whatever was on my iPod, that's what I was listening to. So at that time, it's like 2010, so a lot of Chitty Bang, Hoodie Allen, kind of the frat type rap, Asher Roth, Mac Miller, J. Cole, early stuff, and just listening to whatever they played, and I got obsessed with words and how they could be so clever. And obviously it started simple, like, oh my God, like that's similar, like that was crazy. And being a real nerd about it. And I think every kid who loves rap goes through an Eminem phase at one point of their life. So going through that lyrical miracle phase and like not even caring about the beats or stuff, just like making sure every syllable matches. Through that, like falling in love with mixtapes, and through mixtapes finding instrumentals and being like, oh, that's a Tribe Called Quest beat. Who's that? And then going through my whole 90s phase and going through there. So I always knew I wanted to work in music, whether that be making my own music, which I started doing in high school. But when I went to college, I made sure to join every music industry type club because I was in the business school, or every type of organization I could. And I was in a hip-hop Ohio State group chat of just people who like rap music at Ohio State. And I was writing into the void. No one was answering me. But my friends growing up don't listen to the music I listen to.
Yeah.
So I can't send a Griselda song to them and be like, this crazy that this new song dropped. But I could write in this group chat. Maybe some people would respond. So then a kid who was a year older than me DM'd me on GroupMe and was like, hey, like, I see you're always writing in here. Like, do you want to start a podcast? Did not know this kid. His name is Sam Sarfo, who I did the podcast with for 2 years with. And we initially went into it with that mindset of, there's a lot of people who talk about the J. Coles, the Drakes, which we still wanted to keep doing, the big dogs. But I knew from being an artist that on Twitter, there was this huge demographic of amazing artists who didn't get the publicity. And I really thought they were equally as good. And they had a decent following on Twitter, but maybe they weren't doing the tours yet or getting to that point, or Sway's not inviting them to do the 5 Fingers of Death yet.
Yeah.
So my thought process was we could be the outlet that when they want to drop an album, they're like, oh, we're trying to get the Sound Centric interview first. And kind of through 2 years, building that up, interviewing artists, then sometimes just doing episodes purely about like mainstream hip hop. Sam recently left the podcast to start his career in medicine, which complete support for, was not a bad breakup whatsoever. Yeah. It was time for him to begin his career. And since then, been doing the podcast alone, which encouraged me to get more and more guests every week. And it's been a really fun time. I've talked to some of my favorite rappers of all time, favorite journalists of all time. And I just love talking hip hop.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. I got to say, I commend you on that. And a few things I want to cover from what you just said. First of all, that sounds very similar to what I had to experience as a kid, too, because I shared my iPod with my older brother. He had the library.
Yeah.
I didn't get to, like, always dig into my own stuff until a little bit later. But it sounds like the same era. How are you, like, late 20s, I assume, mid-20s, somewhere in there?
Yeah, I'm 22, turning 23 in June. So I just graduated last year.
All right, so I'm a little bit older. I'm 26. I'll be 27 later this year. But it sounds like we're from the same like type of era, like the blog era of hip hop. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of where we came up on. Did you get to listen to that podcast last summer, the blog era that they did, that It's the Real did?
I never watched the full episodes, but yes, I did follow them and like watch clips from it. Yeah. They're awesome.
You gotta check that out
watching,
whenever
Mac Miller videos, and they were big with like interviewing Mac.
Yeah, whenever you get a chance, man, check out that podcast. It's honestly one of the coolest podcasts I've ever heard. They took like 3 years to do it, and they just covered like all the bases, all kinds of different artists from that whole time period. It's probably one of the coolest shows I've heard. But yeah, it sounds like we're kind of in the same lane of like the same artists and similar vibes. So that's pretty cool. And you're not from Ohio though, right? Because you said you went to Ohio State, but I don't think you're from Ohio, right?
I'm from South Jersey, so right outside of Philadelphia, like 15 minutes away. And so that's like, man, my partner was from Ohio. Yeah. We were just completely separate, different people. So that's kind of what made it so cool that we were like, had this such strong connection of debating hip hop. Yeah. It was just fun.
Yeah. What was your experience like at Ohio State other than the hip hop stuff? Because I don't live in Columbus, but I live closer to Cleveland, so I've been here my whole life. But how was it?
I could not say enough good words about my experience. It was awesome. If you want to talk about the sports perspective, it sucks that I happened to go the 2 years that we lost to Michigan out of a 10-year run where we beat them every year. Yeah, that was sad. But coming from being such a diehard Philly fan and going there and seeing like Saturdays, everyone that lives remotely close to Columbus wearing red and coming was such a sick experience every Saturday. It was just an awesome school. I minored in music business, so they had that for me. That was exciting. I helped put on the concerts that came with our student tuition. So I put on concerts for Jaden Smith and Big Time Rush. That was hilarious, watching a boy band perform. Never seen that before. Girls going crazy over like a simple spin move. And I loved it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I know the sports scene in general up here is crazy. I'm not a college person, so I'm not like, I don't have a team or anything, but I always like keep an ear out to that as well. I got a couple buddies that are Michigan fans. They've been loving the last couple years, but everybody else is not.
It's been rough.
Not so happy. So, but that's cool, man. And I think it's great to even be able to have those experiences where it's like you were around it, in college. You were around kind of the industry and being able to interview artists and things like that. And talk about a little bit about your experience as an artist as well. And like, how did that begin, and how has that evolved over time? And are you still completely focused on that, or are you more focused now on the show because you've gained traction with the podcast? And like, how do you split the focus between the two?
Yeah. So I'll say the initial mindset of making music in high school, I was writing for like freshman, sophomore year in a notebook, hiding it in class, writing all the time. No one ever knew. And I told myself, I'm like, I would be full of regret if I looked back and never tried this thing, which is interesting. I always, in my head, I'm a very self-conscious person, but when it comes to like releasing, whether it's a podcast or music, for some reason I have the confidence to be like, fuck it, I'm just going to drop that stuff.
Yeah.
And so I remember I interviewed Taylor Bennett, who was Chance the Rapper's brother, for my high school newspaper. I was going to a concert and I just reached out because I wrote for my school newspaper and I was like, hey, can I get an interview? And he said yes, which was insane. And I wanted to be creative, so I brought him a Genius annotated version of my own song where like I had the lyrics on one side and the annotation on another side. So Taylor Bennett was the first person to ever know I made music. I showed it to him that night, went home, told my parents, I'm like, I want to buy a microphone. Like I want to try doing this music thing, and fell in love with it. And I'll say that I have a realistic viewpoint on my music, that I enjoy making music purely because I like doing it. And maybe at one point I was like, oh, it'd be so sick if it's a career. If that happened, cool. But I just like making music and getting excited over a song I made. And I think J. Cole had a quote about something like this, where if you make music for other people because you're hoping that it pops off and it doesn't pop off, it feels a lot worse than when you make music you like and it doesn't pop off, because it's like, at least I can play and be like, I really enjoy this thing.
Yeah.
So throughout college, kept making music, started the podcast, and I'm trying to release new music soon. It's been a minute. It's been since September. And I think people stop, as my followers grow, I think people forget because most people don't know I make music. So I want to give them that little reminder, because I think that gives me a little bit more of a, like authority. Not that I really, but like the fact that I've been through it, I can empathize with the anxiety of releasing music with an artist. And I can talk about, I've gone through that too. And even releasing a podcast, it's hard to release that to the world.
Yeah.
So I think it helps with having that ability to empathize with the artists you talk to and other creators.
I definitely love that, because I always tend to say, you got to do what you enjoy at the end of the day, because if the joy is not involved, it's not going to matter what you're putting out. You're not going to be happy with it, and therefore other people probably won't be as happy with it either. So I love that 100%. You're just doing it because you love it at the end of the day. And it is the same with the podcasting too, because it's like if you're not putting your heart into it and you don't have a real like why you're wanting to do it, it's not going to really work out very well. Yeah. And I think for you, I think that's even why this podcast that you're doing has had so much success, because you can tell you actually care about what you're talking about, and the people you're interviewing too. When you bring guests on, you really care about this stuff, and it shows. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I think that's great, man. And I also love go ahead.
I was gonna say, when like people reach out to me and they're like, can I come on the podcast? I'll say in the nicest way possible, send me your music, because I want to be a fan of you first, because I don't want to be someone who's making artists pay me to come on the podcast, nor do I want to just bring people on because they're begging me. Like, I want to be a fan of you so that you can feel, because it's a lot of work to do the podcast, edit it, do the research for it, because I want to be someone who does the research and isn't just asking about random, who's your top 5 every single episode. Yeah. And so I always want to make sure I'm passionate about the people I bring on.
Absolutely.
So that comes out.
Yeah. And that kind of leads me into what I was just going to say, which is I love the parallels between kind of my show and your show. I think we run our platforms very similarly, because I even started, when I first started out, I wanted to bring on a lot of bigger people too. And I did have some cool people that were on the show. But then I was like, I feel like I'm getting more by interviewing independent artists or the up and coming artists. And I feel like they almost appreciate it more because it's either their first podcast or they're just looking to get their name out there. And they love it when you're like saying, hey, I have this platform. You can just come on. You don't have to pay me. Like, we'll just do this and it'll be a cool experience. So I think that's cool too. And to just be able to build it up like that and shed light on people that, like you said earlier, they might not have had those opportunities yet. You know what I mean? So I think that means a lot. So.
Yeah, I felt as going through as an artist, reaching out to people, and they're like, yeah, just send me like $30 for blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And I knew, I'm like, these people are so talented, and like, I would love to just be a person that's helping out with them. And I've slowly got a mixture of bigger artists. I've interviewed one of the rappers from Earth Gang. I'm at a Dreamville stand. That was a really cool moment for me. So it's like balancing that, but also still trying to help the artists that I love and finding new outlets, because I'm trying to diversify my content. So not just have the podcast now create like other streams of content to also, cause it's a lot of work to do an interview. So if I can find smaller ways of doing interviews, like written interviews that they fill out a form and I can make a graphic for them or something. But yeah, always trying to help these people out, because they're sometimes just as good as the major artists and they just haven't got that moment yet.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I got to ask too about just being able to balance, what you're doing with the pod. Because I assume, because you said you had a partner, he's off doing his own thing now. Are you
Yeah.
doing all of this stuff by yourself? You don't have anyone else? Like you're making all the
I,
content, all that stuff?
yeah, doing it all myself. I
Yeah.
will say unemployment helps, as I've been looking for a job the
Oh,
past year for something in the music industry.
yeah.
So I'll say the benefit of that at this point, a gap year. It's crazy that it's already March and I'm watching April. Damn it, April, and people are starting to graduate already.
Yeah.
But having this year to fully give it my all with Sound Centric and watching it grow the past few months has been awesome, and it has me just as passionate with music every day, because the job hunt can be very discouraging
Yeah.
and could easily make me be like, screw this. And some days it does feel like that, but then seeing an artist be happy that I shouted them out, I'm like, you know what? Like, I made that person's day, so that's a cool feeling.
Hey there, hope you're enjoying the episode so far. I just wanted to take a quick minute out to let you know about a couple different ways that you can support the podcast. One of the ways is by clicking that support the podcast button within your streaming platform. That is if you want to be a monthly supporter of the show. You can contribute either 99 cents, $5, or $10 a month. So that's the first way, and that's the more traditional way that we've had now for the last couple years. The other method that we actually just recently introduced is from our good friends over at Ko-fi. Ko-fi is a virtual tip jar. We have set our limit to a minimum of $10, but you can go make one-time, one-off donations. So if you visit ko-fi.com/the Proven Knowledge Podcast, you'll be able to donate. And all these different forms of donation go towards getting new guests every single week, getting potential sponsors on board to do giveaways, and overall just making the show better for you guys. So if you want to do that Ko-fi link, it's ko-fi.com/the Proven Knowledge Podcast. Otherwise, again, look for that support the podcast button in your streaming platform if you'd like to be a monthly supporter. And I just want to say thank you guys for your contributions. And without further ado, let's get back into the episode. And that does lead me into kind of my question, which is, how are you balancing that now? Because like you said, I feel like even having to search for a job at the same time is a lot of energy, that requires, especially if you're looking for something that you want to make a career. It's like you want to make sure you get the right thing as well and the right opportunity. So having to balance that with getting the show in the position you want it to be in, like how has that been? Do you feel overwhelmed at all in any way, or you think you've managed it pretty well?
I think I've managed it pretty well, although there's definitely those days where you're like, I don't want to make a TikTok. I just don't want to content create today.
Yeah.
And I can do a better job at reutilizing old content because it's never dead. A video about J. Cole can work at any day. So I wish I got to get better at posting an old TikTok again. If I don't post TikTok one day, because I should try to post every single day on there. And then some weeks it's hard to get a guest. Sometimes people cancel on you, and you'll relate to this. We're like entrepreneurs in this. So if an episode doesn't come out one week, it's not ruining anyone's week. Like, they're fine with it. It's about me. I have to have the dedication to put it out every week, because there's no boss saying, oh, you're fired now, you didn't put it out. It's still alive, and people are still going to tune in the next week if I drop it, but it's all on my shoulders to get the content out, to edit it. If that means releasing the episode not on a Wednesday, which is my usual release date, and pushing it back to a Friday, just to get more content out, then that's what I got to do.
Yeah. And I think that goes kind of the parallels of being an artist with being a podcaster too, is like, people always think you got someone looking over your shoulder all the time, like a normal job, but it's definitely not like that at all. And the self-discipline has to come in somewhere. And like we said earlier about, finding joy in what you do, I feel like that comes from enjoying what you do. You know what I mean? Because you don't just build self-discipline out of nowhere unless you're like, wow, I really believe in what I'm doing. I'm just going to keep practicing every day. And then the self-discipline gets easier. So by the time you're like 4 or 5 years in, you're like, oh, this feels routine now because I do this every day.
Yeah.
And I think people like me and you know that, because we've done this for a while now. We know that we enjoy what we do. And I think it's just getting to that point where you're like, man, I'm just going to go for it no matter what. You know what I mean? And just see what happens. So.
And seeing the improvement from the old episodes is always fun, because you thought you were good at that point. Same thing with music. I remember you thought you were so good 1 month, and 2 months later you're like, oh, that was awful. Then 2 months later you thought that was awful, and it's a constant going. And to your point about the artists, like also, it's like you're an entrepreneur and there's no one telling you to drop music.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a story about a producer from Top Dog Entertainment, which is like Schoolboy Q, SZA, Kendrick's old label, and he got signed to the label as a producer, and he thought that meant he should just be getting placements now, and people he'd start getting beats on everyone's albums. Then he realized, oh no, they just like gave me the opportunity to now I have to take advantage of it, and I have to book studio time, and I have to get the people in. So sometimes people expect things just to happen for them, even if they get signed to a label, but it's like, nah, that's just the start.
Yeah.
And you gotta keep writing. And sometimes it's hard. There's months where I've gone where I've stopped making music. I'm sure other artists have done that too. And it's like, you gotta do it for yourself first, because it's gonna be way harder if you're doing it for other people.
Exactly. 100%, man. Let's talk about hip hop for a little bit. Let's kind of just go off the cuff for a little bit, because I know you could probably talk about this stuff all day. What artists, like, let's say 2024, or maybe even last year, like, who do you think you've been listening to the most? Obviously J. Cole, I know, would probably be the main person, but like Cole could be one, but who else you got you've been checking out?
Yes, Jordan Ward is someone who I have been completely obsessed with. I saw him open for the JID Smino tour, which are two of my other top artists, and I had heard him before on different albums, but I never really dove into his music. And he had dropped an album called Forward, and it became my favorite album of the year by far last year, and could be one of my favorite albums of the 2020s. And he just dropped a new song this week, so I'm obsessed with Jordan Ward. So that's one person I would definitely highlight. Always a fan of Tyler, the Creator. I love what he does. Mac Miller. I mean, I guess there's no recent music, but love Mac. Anderson .Paak dropping his new album this summer, No Worries, too. Can't wait for that.
That's the one with Knowledge, right?
Yeah. So that's one of my favorite albums ever, that first one. And it's coming out the day before my birthday, so it seems like the stars are aligning. Yeah. So really excited for that. And some smaller artists that I don't even want to call them smaller, some rising artists that I've been really loving. Chris Patrick from New Jersey. He's been on the podcast a few times. I think he's the one. Like, he's so good. Dende, they're both like a part of a collective, and they can sing so well and rap so well. I'm a big believer that you don't have to be able to sing, but it's really hard to make it as an artist if you can't do multiple things with your voice. Like, not everyone wants to push a T and can just rap in that same way every time and be amazing. So being able to change it up and have an R&B type song and sing so well that JID can do, I think makes his like audience grow that much more. So these guys can rap and sing so well. Another person from St. Louis, Andrew Kelly. This kid is insane. A lot of just Twitter has all these artists that are just amazing. And I just always suggest to people, don't worry about follower amounts. Like, when you're looking for new music, like, there's people that are just as good that don't have those followers.
Yeah. The way I view that now is I'll go, because this is what I kind of love about streaming. One of the few things I actually like about streaming now is I could go to Spotify, listen to like a certain artist playlist or their album, and then it'll give me all these other artists that I'd never heard of, but it's like, oh, I just discovered this song out of nowhere. I wasn't even looking for it. So it's kind of like that in a way. I view like Spotify as like a social media platform in itself, because it's like you're just going through and it's giving you these artists to listen to. I'll have to check those guys out though, because I'm always looking for people as well to tap in with. So that's super awesome, man. And let's just, since it's relevant, since it's happening in real time, let's talk about like what's been going on. The Kendrick, Drake, Cole, Rick Ross, apparently all these people now are sending disses back and forth to one another. How do you view all that stuff? Because here's my take on it. I don't think that rap beef is as serious as it once was, where people are going to end up like actually having their lives threatened over any of this stuff. I don't think it's real to that extent at all anymore. I just think it's more for like, let's just do this because we enjoy doing it. And I feel like a lot of these guys are actually close friends behind the scenes. It's just the general public doesn't know that. And they don't view it that. Especially like Cole and Kendrick. It's well documented. They're very close friends. And their labels have interchangeable artists and producers all the time. They're always collaborating. Like, I don't think anybody would sit there and be like, oh, this is a serious like thing. Yeah. And I think that's what Cole's apology had to do with like last week, because he was like, I knew when I made the record, my heart wasn't in it because couldn't take it seriously. So like, how do you view all this stuff going on, or even like the beefs we've seen in the last like 4 or 5 years?
Yeah. So specifically with the J. Cole thing, so I agree. I knew that, like, in my head, I know they're good friends.
Yeah.
I don't know how close of friends, but they have respect for each other clearly throughout the years. So some people thought the Kendrick diss was so crazy. I never even thought it was that crazy. I thought he was just competitively sparring with them, especially with Cole. He just said, like, he didn't even say anything related to Cole. So I never thought Cole had to say anything. And if he did say something, I thought he could have kept it just lyrical. And I think he realized he messed up when he came at Kendrick's discography. I'm sure he was like, you know what? I respect this guy. Like, I didn't want to, like, come with the music that I also enjoy.
Yeah.
And maybe he saw the reception of that diss and was like, they didn't even like the line anyway. So now it's not even like people are praising me for the diss.
Yeah.
I'm getting hate for the diss, and I also didn't want to do it in the first place. So people will say that changes how they view J. Cole ever. They're like, every line I go back to where he's being cocky, I can't hear it anymore. I'll let my bias block me from that. I love him still. Yeah. So I'm bumping my delete later still. And it's not, I like Cole for introspective Cole, and I can still bump Cole where he's talking about killing everybody on a verse, even though I guess he didn't want to smoke with Kendrick. And then I will also say that I think Pusha T's diss on Drake, which I think is the best diss ever, I think that has changed people's expectations for a diss record. They think there's always supposed to be secret information that is supposed to be dug up. And that was kind of what the whole Drake and Meek thing was. Like, yo, this guy's not writing his raps. It's like, whoa, Drake's not writing his raps. It's insane. So I think people are always expecting some secret information, like Kendrick secretly is like anti blah, 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 or Kendrick secretly not writing his own raps, or To Pimp a Butterfly was another rapper in TDE's idea. And like, I just think that's too high to set the bar. Yeah. I thought Drake came back with his diss really well. I thought it was a really good diss record. And coming at Kendrick for a top dog, the head of TDE apparently taking 50% of Kendrick's revenue and saying Top said drop and give me 50. Calling him short, hilarious. Telling Metro to go back to doing drums, hilarious. Rick Ross, he said he's 50. Like, what are you doing? Hilarious. So I think, and like Rick Ross, he posted an Instagram post today, and he's like, tell your mother, like, she's beautiful. Like, even that, I'm like, Rick Ross doesn't hate Drake.
No.
Like, they're going to probably make a song by the end of the year.
Yeah.
So to your point, like, yeah, I don't think it's that serious. And the other side of it, I think it's just so cool that we're seeing the two best. Not Cole's out. Maybe Cole, we're going to end up saying, no, what, he was right. This disc got way too real, and maybe he knew it was going to get way too real and was like, I don't want to be a part of this.
Yeah.
So we'll see if Kendrick presses the red button.
Yeah, and like we said, I think I heard that there was potential he was going to drop something tonight, maybe, but we'll see what happens. I don't know what'll go on, but It's crazy to think that Meek and Drake thing was like 9 years ago already, because I was in high school when that happened. That was my senior year of high school, I think. Or like going into my senior year. I just remember the internet was blowing up about it. That to me is where like the modern stuff kind of began, like on the bigger scale of like what we know now as like the beefs or whatever. So it's kind of crazy. I think to me the best part is that none of these guys are gonna, you know, lose any popularity or lose any career success over this stuff, which is cool.
So I think that's a major thing that people always could, because Meek Mill for a short time, it seemed like his career was over, but then he goes to jail and becomes like a huge public figure. But people are like, Pusha T didn't beat Drake in that battle because Drake's still the most popular artist. And it's like, that's not how we judge battles. Jay-Z and Nas got in a beef, they're doing just fine. Yeah. Dr. Dre and Ice Cube got in a beef, they're doing just fine. So not every beef ends with someone's career ending. Sometimes it just ends with one person doesn't return a verse back because they got.
Yeah, and all these guys are great businessmen. They got great brands. They all know what they're doing, and they all make great music. Yeah. So it's like they're gonna find a way to keep it going. And I do like it. I myself, I don't go run it. I don't check out the disc records. I haven't even heard a lot of the stuff that's been dropped the last few days. But I do think it's kind of fun to like look at and see the memes and stuff is hilarious. Yeah. But yeah, I think it is good for hip hop at the end of the day. Like, I think it's still good to do it and like have it be talked about, and it's cool for the fans too, because I think the fans always love to be able to debate over this stuff, and so we'll see what happens.
I've said it. It's funny that I thought I thought J. Cole and Kendrick Lamar fans were the same type of people. Like, I have Cole my number one, and Kendrick's my debatably number two. Apparently, so many Kendrick fans hate Cole, and so many Cole fans hate Kendrick. and they're coming out and they're like, Kendrick's been trash the whole time. It's like, I thought we were all the same type of person.
Yeah,
that's been a funny realization.
Yeah, it's like every individual. It's like, well, if you go at this person, it's gonna change. It's gonna flip complete 180 360. So, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens for sure. But we're winding down here. Go ahead.
I was gonna say Drake hasn't even dropped the verse officially. It's all been a leak.
Yeah, I was gonna say
far, so
I saw that.
I
kept seeing people say that it leaked, or that somebody that is in the OVO thing leaked it or whatever, and I'm just like, well, I guess we'll just see what goes down with that. See if he actually officially says anything. But yeah, it'd be cool to see what happens for sure. But we're winding down here, and we'll do the last few questions, which are more life-related questions, ones I ask on every episode. The first one is, if you could go back 10 years ago, maybe give yourself a piece of advice, or maybe not change anything at all, what do you think you would do?
Yeah. It's funny. I said this to my parents the other night. I was like, if I told my 17-year-old self that I was still doing this stuff, I got to interview blah, 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 like, I'd be really proud of myself. I'm happy that I was told through doing networking calls for jobs. They're like, oh, you might not have a job until November after college. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, November, like, that might be when I get my role at latest. I'm now a year into my job search, and it's been very full of pressure, and seeing my friends start their lives and start their careers while I'm focusing on my path. So I am proud. I guess I'll tell myself, like, you love this thing, like, keep working at it. And it's really fun having a very strong passion in the world, and don't let that die from anything, like, stopping it. You can jump over those obstacles.
Yeah. Definitely can feel you on that one, man. And if we flip that then and we say 10 years from now, where do you think you envision yourself with the podcast, with whatever else you're looking to do as well?
So it's like I tell myself I have two different career path goals. One is based on my resume of experience, where it's like the jobs I'm applying for right now, and one would be my Sound Centric goal. So I'll answer that in terms of Sound Centric.
Yeah.
I would love for it to be a whole media outlet. I really love what Cole Bennett does with Lyrical Lemonade, where he was hosting concerts that are like Lyrical Lemonade presents Lil Uzi Vert during the peak of SoundCloud era. So these artists that I'm becoming friendly with, and they're respecting what I do for them, and I respect what they do for music. If I get to the point where it's like Sound Centric presents Chris Patrick or blah, blah, blah in New York, that'd be amazing, hosting events, because through this process, I've known how I felt, where I'm like, oh, it's not always someone for me to talk to about this music industry stuff. So hosting events, whether that's just having a bar be open to people who are in the music industry and having them just talk with each other, or hosting live podcasts that are interviews for people who are interested in XYZ figure, whether it's a music industry professional or an artist or a writer. That's where my next goals are for Sound Centric.
Yeah. You might have a festival one day, man. I could see that happening for sure.
Hey,
so
that'd be insane.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you have any final words of wisdom today for the listeners?
I'm sure you'll relate to this. There's a lot of imposter syndrome involved with making content and being like, do I deserve to not deserve, but like, it feels weird talking, like, for me, helping artists out, because I'm a successful artist. So I don't know how many tips I can give you, but I can just give you what I know from my knowledge and business school things learning. My number one tip, if you're really passionate about something, just keep going for it, especially if you're in the situation where you have the ability to go after it. I've been blessed where my parents have been so supportive of me doing this. So there's some days where I feel bad about that. I'm like, I should just got a normal job with the degree I got. And there are other days where I'm like, I have to take advantage of the fact that they're so supportive of me, and I can go after this goal that I have.
Yeah.
So yeah, to people, don't, and if it doesn't have to be your career, I've learned, like, for some people, this happens to line up with my career path because I want to do industry. But if you have a passion for something, just keep doing it. That's what life's about.
Yeah. And I gotta say, Adam, I know for you, man, that's absolutely the case, because I can just tell, when you talk and on your platform and how well you run it, man. That's absolutely the case.
Thank
so
you.
Definitely keep going, man. And that's all I have for you today, dude. And once again, I appreciate you for coming on the show, and we'll have to do it again soon if you're down. But like I said, man, keep up the great work, and I'll be tapped into what you got going on coming up. So congrats, man.
Man, that means a lot. I love going on other platforms just to talk about people, because at the end of the day, we can relate to the struggles of being a creator, and there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for all those kind words, and Thank you for letting me come on your platform.
Thanks everyone for listening today. That was episode 206. We'll be back this time next week. As always, hit the support button on your podcast streaming platform if you'd like to send any funds. And feel free to leave us that 5-star rating if you enjoyed today's episode. So we'll see you then. Thanks everyone.